Hello and welcome to ThePrint. I am Niyati Kothiyal and we are in conversation with Mr. Jaithirth Rao. Sir is a regular columnist with ThePrint and he's an author and a former entrepreneur. Today we are discussing his latest column on Nehruvian economics. So, sir, I'd like to start with Trump and not with Nehru. So, you you write about Trump and how he says that if a country stops making everyday goods, if a country stops making microwaves, cheap microwaves, and even everyday toys, then they won't have the capability to manufacture ships and manufacture military goods. And as you write, you used to have a different argument to that. So please talk about how that argument has evolved.
It all started, in some sense, with my own semi-conversion from where I was. I was always a great supporter of globalization. And the basic argument I used to use was that Americans, when they go to their department stores, are buying microwaves dirt cheap. And why can they do that? Because China is making them. So Americans are richer if you measure their income in terms of microwave ovens or of any of these traded goods. They're getting more traded goods for the same money. And therefore, globalization is almost an unalloyed good. I think it's not what so much Trump says as the ambiance he has created. He says many things, some of which are so haphazard, it's difficult to read them. But the ambiance he has created is that this loss of manufacturing technology, human capital, is a security threat. It is not just about buying cheap goods. So if every time you aim to get the lowest price for traded goods, which is what globalization basically supports, you could be putting the security of your country at risk. That's the ambiance that he has created. Today, for instance, not only does China make cheap microwaves and US makes no microwaves, but US hardly builds any ships. China builds 100 times more ships than the US does. And the human capital required to do the manufacturing of ships has also deteriorated significantly in the United States. It need not have, but it has happened. Steel manufacture, variety of things deteriorate once you go always for the cheapest price option. That's not what Trump is saying, but that's the effect of what he is saying. In some sense, we've all been brought up on Adam Smith and why free trade is good. But even Adam Smith said Britain should keep a strong navy. I haven't been able to find what Adam Smith said about shipbuilding. But how can you have a strong navy if you don't have a strong shipbuilding industry? You can't keep buying ships from other people to create a strong navy. More than that, I think what Trump has done, again, he's not an intellectual. He's not doing this out of intellectual conviction. But the atmosphere he has created makes us all go back to a European economist called Friedrich List, who also lived in America for some time. Now, List was opposed to Adam Smith's free trade liberalism policies, saying that countries need to first and foremost develop economic and military security, and the two are intertwined. And this is an idea that other people have had. I mentioned in my column Alexander Hamilton, a founding father of the United States. He had it, tariffs. And so this is what I mean. It's not that Trump has said it, but the atmosphere he has created has led us all to revisit some of our fundamentals. The cheap microwaves are everything. Cheap refrigerators are everything. And if the US consumer can get that, then globalization must be good. But if you stop making refrigerators, and if you stop making microwaves, and you severely reduce making ships, then you have a security issue. Consider the COVID stuff, the things, ventilators. Now, ventilators require many small parts. If you don't have those parts, when the pandemic hits you, you can't import those parts because sea lanes are frozen or whatever, then you can't make ventilators. So the whole issue of globalization needs now to be looked at not only from the economic perspective of low prices and value for money, but also from the security perspective. And for somebody like me, who is a committed Adam Smithian, it's quite let me tell you, it's not been easy. It's not been easy to grapple with this view of the world, because post-pandemic and the recent tiffs across countries, this national security issue has become quite central.
Can you elaborate a bit more on, how it's a very interesting thing how you sort of juxtapose national security with making cheap everyday items in the economy. Can you sort of elaborate
Yeah,
on that?
because see, let's put it this way. Many of the component parts that go into a microwave also may be going into an aircraft engine, also may be going into a particular aspect of the ship's navigation systems. So what happens is, if the engineering capabilities of the country deteriorate in one area, if manufacturing declines across the board, then security is at risk. Because it's not, many electronic items, many mechanical items are interspersed. They go through different industries. And the ability to make them becomes very, very difficult. And also your human capital talent. You stop having factory workers. You stop having workers, your engineers who can manage plants, manage production schedules. In fact, that's one of the problems that the US shipbuilding industry is facing today. So it's a much more complex and what shall I say, interwoven thing. So I think all of us need to go. Of course, we need to reread Adam Smith, because I'm not sure he would have been that simplistic. But we also need to read Frederick List and try and understand the current state of the world.
Let's come back to Nehru and Nehru's economic approach. So you say that in the 1950s, Nehru's economic policies were not very different from Japan after 1868. Then why is it that Nehruvian economics failed and Japan is where Japan is and we are where we are?
Well, I think several things. This goes back to, generally we all criticize Nehru and Nehru's economic policies. That's kind of fashionable. But in the present day's context, especially if you're revisiting Frederick List, one has to go and re-examine that. What did Nehru want? He wanted a very strong industrial base in India. And he was willing to postpone other consumption activities. Actually drag resources out of the economy, postpone consumption, and invest in industry, which is pretty much what Japan did in 1868. They didn't go in for a high consumption economy. They went in for industrializing. And they created some of the greatest firms in the world, Mitsubishi, Hitachi, and so on. If Nehru had a very similar policy, to Alexander Hamilton and Meiji Japan. What went wrong? And I've tried to explain that in my column. I don't think Nehru's analytical perspective at the high level was wrong. We needed to create steel, machine tools, hardcore industries, because that's the only way you can have a secure economy, not just a low price economy. You can import stuff from around the world and do low price, but it won't be a secure economy. But we failed because I think we implemented it wrongly. How did Japan implement it? They encouraged great Japanese companies to become national champions. Korea did the same, South Korea did the same thing, encouraged their companies and conglomerates to become national champions. What happened in India, unfortunately, and this was not just within Nehru's Congress Party, it was across the board, across many political parties in the country, they were anti-Indian business. In fact, there is a saying that that they wouldn't even have minded foreign capital so much as Indian capital. But if you just look at the parliamentary speeches, not just of the Congress parliament members, but PSP, SSP, CPI, all of them had places in the parliament. They hated the Tatas, the Birlas, all Indian businesses, and their whole approach was, let's try and throttle them. So instead of pushing champions, we throttle them. And Nehru, for his own reasons, because he was being influenced by Fabian socialists in London and so on, decided, okay, I'm going to industrialize. We all decide we don't want to let Tata, Birla, anyone do it. So we will do it in the public sector. And that became a national albatross. Walchand Hirachand had started Hindustan Aircraft. It could have been left in the private sector. Who knows? It could have become a Mitsubishi. We don't know. We just didn't encourage those enterprises. He started Hindustan Shipyard in Vishakhapatnam. That also we nationalized. Everything came into the public sector kitty. And the public sector was largely run as an extension of a government department, not as a commercial enterprise. In fact, Nehru told J.R.D. Tata, I hate profits. I hate the word profit. So these became extension of government departments. Not only did you have a Hindustan Steel, because Tatas and Indian Iron were not given licenses to expand as a huge behemoth in the steel industry, but you also had a Ministry of Steel. I don't know why we needed a Ministry of Steel, but we did. And from here, every month, the chairman of Hindustan Steel had to go and meet some joint secretary in Delhi. And it became the public sector, and especially the way the public sector was organized. It didn't have to be that way. Pohang Steel, which is a Korean steel company, one of the largest in the world, is a public sector company. But it's not organized as the extension of a government department. And many of the civil servants managed to grab many of these jobs in Hindustan Steel and many other public sector companies. And we created a public sector albatross. If Hindustan Machine Tools had been a public-private partnership or had been a private company with some encouragement, subsidy, investment from the government, I think we might have been one of the greatest machine tool manufacturers in the world today, but we didn't. We made them, and once you get in the public sector, if you ask these fellows, why do you need a department of steel? They'll say, opposition MPs have a right to ask questions about public sector. And we have to have somebody in Delhi, some joint secretary, preparing the answers for the minister. So whether the steel company produces chromium steel or titanium steel, The opposition MP can ask that question. Now, this is absurd. That is their commercial decision, their technical decision. They should be allowed. So if we had gone for public-private partnership or encouragement of private sector champions, I believe we would have had a better story. So in some sense, Nehru got trapped by his own bureaucracy. And since he had himself a bit of a dislike for wealthy people, so encouraging private sector champions was not in his DNA. I mentioned in my column, he came from a landlocked state where rich people were all landowners. So he associated wealth with rentier income. He didn't associate it with enterprise and risk-taking. And also he was very close to the Fabians. No, the Fabians were very dangerous people because they kept talking about the poor. They never met the poor. They were all theoreticians. And they were eugenicists. Fabians actually wanted to control the genetic character of the population of Britain. They've gone on record saying that. So I don't think the idea of hardcore, strong industrialization behind protective tariffs and giving encouragement to native industry, especially human capital development, because we had to develop the skills. The British, by and large, they set up 3 or 4 engineering colleges, but by and large, they set up a lot of law colleges in India. So setting up engineering colleges, Nalini Ranjan Sarkar had come up with the idea in 1945. Nehru ran with it with great enthusiasm. So those were all the right things we did. But not developing our own national champions, looking down on entrepreneurs and wealth creators, and passing the job to the public sector run by bureaucrats who are not interested in profit-making results. They are good at procedures. That is what got us down. So return on capital employed on all our public sector behemoths was asymptotically tended towards zero and sometimes going into the negative. So that was one of the problems. But in fairness to Nehru, it was difficult to do the industrialization strategy that he wanted to do. And one of the biggest things was we were a net importer of food. In 1937, the British had removed Burma from the Indian Empire. Since then, we were a net importer of food. And there was always food shortage. And it got worse as our population grew. And this was a major constraint because usually you need to have a strong agriculture before you can do strong industrialization. The US had it when Hamilton advocated for industries. Britain with the enclosures and so on had it before they moved to industrialization. So this was a big problem for him. And if you look at it, there has been no real attempt by any government, any leader in Delhi to do economic reform until the Green Revolution solved our food problem. That is what in the 70s happened. And slowly in the 80s, Indira Gandhi started loosening up. Rajiv Gandhi started loosening up. And in the 90s, Narasimha Rao loosening up. Because by then, Narasimha Rao said, okay, we have enough food. I don't have to import food. I'm not ship to mouth kind of thing. The second thing was again unfortunate, but it was the times. Nobody those days looked at currency depreciation as a way to deal with foreign trade. It was all about import controls, import licensing. And that meant that a lot of intermediate goods couldn't come. That's why I use that example. You can have a microwave factory in India, but to make it, there will be 2-3 items that you have to import from Hong Kong or Belgium or something. Now, if you have 100% duties on them, or you have import licensing, I have to go to Delhi every time and get some paper stamp in order to import those two, three items, I can't make the microwave. And the way is to get rid of import licensing and import controls, but make the rupee weak, then automatically those component prices will go up. And maybe some Indian guy will make that because his profit margin goes up. Or we will find a way to use them, reduce them, make them more efficient. Something will happen, the price signal. But in the 50s, nobody looked at currency depreciation. Everybody looked at import controls, import licensing that had come from the Second World War days, and that remained. The principal point I want to make is Nehru's basic vision wasn't wrong. The implementation, the Japanese, Koreans got better than we did because they did not have hostility to business companies and conglomerates. We had that built into our political system and not just in Nehru's party. That's the point I want to make. Now, what are we talking about? Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is exactly what Nehru said, self-sufficiency. We are talking about PLI schemes. We are talking about reviving Indian rare earths. We are talking of giving subsidies and encouragement to Indian shipbuilding. We are talking about doing PLI schemes to get strategic APIs production back into India. These are all hardcore industrialization. We're talking about probably making aircraft engines in India. If Tatas and Mahindras can make good cars and SUVs and trucks, don't you think they can make tanks? Is it that difficult? The issue really is no, all tanks will be made only in the public sector. Then you run into this problem. So I think now defense has been opened up, aerospace, space, aviation, aircraft building. So you will find, and I think today nobody is scared of supporting champions. We are not scared of selling Air India back to the Tatas. It was originally a Tata airline. We nationalized it unnecessarily. We now given it back to. We're not scared of supporting Indian business champions. And both small and big. We're celebrating so many startups, so many new companies. So I think the atmosphere today is not against wealth creators. Thank God there is no Samyukta Socialist Party and Praja Socialist Party and the CPI is in doldrums. Thank God. So we don't have those forces that are forcing our leadership to disavow national champions. If Korea can support Samsung and Hyundai, we can support Tata and Adani and Ambani and Kotak and Birla, whoever we want to support. And Mahindras, and they can go ahead. And we can support a lot of small guys. After all, Walchand Hirachand was a relatively small person when he had Hindustan Aircraft and Hindustan Shipyard. He was not as big as Tata or Dalmia, but he was very enterprising and he was a visionary. Now, if Nehruvian economics is reviving, if we avoid some of those implementation and operational problems, we can start giving credit back to Nehru for at least having had the right conceptions. And I think, economic fashions come and go. So I think all of us to now should spend some time reading lists. I'm sure he's also made mistakes. I'm not saying list is all correct. And that's not the issue. The issue is there are different ways of looking at it. And in his own bewildering, haphazard way, Trump's actions have opened up some of these conversations among us.
But sir, do tell, we are criticizing Nehru for being hostile towards businesses and business people. And in today's context, there's also criticism of the current dispensation that they give too much leeway to some specific.
This is completely misplaced criticism.
But
It's
don't you
completely.
think that we need a sort of balance so
No,
that,
no, we have to encourage our national champions. No country in the world has progressed without encouraging national champions. An American president actually said the you know policy of America is General Motors policy. He said that. So this idea that whoever runs a great and efficient refinery in the country, we have to support. Whoever is willing to set up a semiconductor chip plant in Assam, we have to support. We have to encourage. We have to go rara. Whoever is willing to buy a port in Australia or Israel, these are people we have to support. Whoever is willing to make tractors, some of the best tractors in the world, and then buy a Korean tractor company and an American tractor company, we have to support. We have to support our national business champions. This is misplaced criticism that somehow we are doing them a favor. We are not. We are just supporting those who are we going to support? Are you going to support Samsung? Who are you going to support? Tell me. Are you
yeah,
going to support? We have to support our guys.
no, I totally understand your point. We have to like support our own guys, but do you think that there should be a balance between how much support the government gives to the business people and how.
I don't know. That would be on a case by case basis. In
Hmm.
steel, you may give less support because steel technology is better, more standardized. In shipbuilding, you might give more support because we've fallen so far behind. In aircraft engines, we should welcome Rolls-Royce to come to India. They want to come. So in each of these, that will be case by case. We'll have to take a look at it where we support and where we don't. Generally, high import licensing, import constraints we should avoid. We should go with a relatively slightly, not very, slightly aggressive rupee depreciation. Korea, Taiwan, Japan, they all kept their currencies undervalued when they grew. That automatically gives us price signal that imports are expensive, exports are more profitable, and many things happen without having a import licensing, DGTD and DGSND in Delhi deciding who can get imported components. And I think we should, I like PLI, it's a good scheme. We should look at things like that because it's interesting. If you look at all the statements coming out of Niti Aayog and even the PM, nobody is saying be inefficient companies in India and make shoddy goods. It's must be world class, must be exportable, must stand the test of international markets, and we will help you, we will support you. That's the way we need to look at it. It's tough. You think they didn't make some mistakes in 1880 in Japan or in 1970 Changpakhi, whatever in Korea? They did. There was some corruption allegations against Samsung or Daewoo or something. I mean, these things will happen, but we have to be very clear. America succeeds if General Motors succeeds. America succeeds if Nvidia succeeds. Here, we said India can succeed without Tata and Birla succeeding. That's a stupid idea. That really is. They were the biggest. In fact, they probably had an easier time doing business under British rule than they had under independent India. There were so many companies who could have grown. Indian Iron and Steel Company, Sir Biren Mukherjee was the entrepreneur who set it up. Brilliant company. It just was allowed to go down, later nationalized. We should not repeat that mistake. But we should go back to understanding the clear, patriotic, clear headed, strong, muscular ideas that Nehru had. And as I said, while I would never stop reading Adam Smith, why everybody must reread him at least once a year, but this Friedrich List is somebody we should take a look at.
This was Niyati. Keep watching The Print. Thank you.
Thank you.